grandfather's garden wasn't just a patch of land. It was a living scrapbook. He planted it in 1965, a year after buying the last undeveloped acre in what would later become the Glenridge Acres neighborhood. Long before the HOA, long before the cookie-cutter houses, this was just wild earth and dreams. Roses bordered the fence line. Tomatoes and snap peas grew in raised beds my grandfather built by hand. There was an oak tree with a swing that had been passed down to me, and now to my daughter. Everyone loved Grandpa Joe's garden, except the HOA. One Friday afternoon, a letter arrived from Glenridge Acres Homeowners Association. Dear resident, please be advised that Lot 91, currently unbuilt and known informally as Joe's Garden, has been reclassified as HOA common property and is scheduled for landscaping redevelopment. Demolition of existing, unauthorized plantings will begin Monday, 8 a.m. They were going to destroy it, without so much as a phone call. Joe left the property to me when he passed. But because the HOA had gradually acquired rights to shared development space in the neighborhood, there had been confusion over where their jurisdiction began and ended. And they were taking advantage of that. I wasn't a lawyer, but I was a city planner. I knew the difference between a HOA claim and a binding property line, and I knew exactly how to fight back. First, I pulled the original land surveys from 1965, along with the deed Joe signed over to me in 2012. Then I compared those to the HOA's supposed updated zoning map. Their map had a glaring error. They had used GIS software that didn't take legacy lot designations into account. In short, they had claimed land that was never theirs. With a notarized copy of the original survey and deed, I filed a formal injunction with the local zoning authority. Demolition would not begin Monday. The HOA president, a slick man named Brent Collier, called a special meeting on Sunday evening. He stood at the head of the rec center room with a laser pointer and an air of authority. This garden is an eyesore. It's inefficient land use. It lowers property values. We intend to build a dog run, benches, maybe a putting green. I raised my hand. Do you have legal claim to the land? Brent paused. We have plans submitted and approved. But do you own it? Silence. After the meeting, several neighbors approached me quietly. We love Joe's garden. My son learned to plant tomatoes there. Why does the HOA think they can just steamroll over people? Let me know if you start a petition. We'll sign. That night, I launched a website, savejoesgarden.org. Within 48 hours, it had 600 signatures from residents, former neighbors, and even local school kids who had taken field trips to Joe's garden. Brent wasn't going to back down quietly. He filed a motion to block the injunction, claiming the garden constituted an attractive nuisance, a legal term for something on your property that could harm children. He also had someone tip off code enforcement. Within a week, I had violations on my door for everything from non-uniform fencing materials to excessive ground cover density. It was war. I didn't retaliate with shouting or social media blasts. I responded with paperwork. I contacted the local land trust. They helped me secure temporary historical landmark status for the garden, citing its continuous cultivation since the mid-1960s and community impact. I also found a loophole. The HOA's own bylaws had never been updated to reflect county changes in green space designation, which meant they couldn't legally touch a thing. At the next HOA meeting, I presented the land trust letter and historical documentation. Brent's face went pale. You went behind the board's back. No, I said. I followed the law. You tried to erase my grandfather's legacy. The board was silent. Then an elderly woman named Marcia spoke up. I vote we withdraw the garden redevelopment plan. A vote was called. It passed. Brent stormed out. I knew the fight wasn't truly over. As long as Brent held power, the garden was at risk. So I did the unthinkable. I offered to buy the entire common area the HOA had claimed ownership over. 3 vacant lots, technically under HOA management, adjacent to Joe's garden. They were barely used and cost the HOA more in upkeep than they were worth. After 2 months of negotiation, my offer was accepted. With legal ownership secured, I worked with the city to officially rezone the combined lots as public parkland. We installed benches, community compost bins, and native pollinator gardens. Local students painted murals. Retirees donated birdhouses. We added an educational walking path explaining the history of the land. Joe's garden became Joe Morrison Community Park. Facing a PR nightmare, Brent resigned from the HOA board. It turned out he had diverted HOA maintenance funds to a private landscaping company he secretly owned. Once discovered, he was sued by the association. The lawsuit made headlines in the local news. HOA president steps down amid corruption scandal. Years later, my daughter now swings from the same oak tree I once did. Children run through the garden paths where I learned about patience, life cycles, and dirty hands. A plaque by the entrance reads, "In memory of Joe Morrison, who taught us to grow with care and fight with love." Last spring, I received a letter from the city council. They were nominating Joe Morrison Community Park for the Regional Civic Preservation Award. The nomination read, "For protecting green space, honoring family legacy, and resisting unjust HOA pressure." If Grandpa Joe were here today, he'd probably be sitting on that old bench, sipping his iced tea and shaking his head. All that trouble for a few tomatoes? Then he'd laugh, because he knew it was never just about tomatoes. It was about dignity, roots, and fighting for what's right. And thanks to him, and a little bit of paperwork, the neighborhood learned what it means to grow something real. Subscribe to DD's Stories for more real HOA revenge stories where justice grows deeper than roots. The first time I caught Derek rifling through my mailbox, I thought I was seeing things. It was 6 a.m. on a Tuesday, and I was grabbing coffee when I spotted someone in a HOA polo shirt standing at my mailbox with a handful of envelopes. By the time I got outside, he was gone, but my gut told me something was very wrong. Derek Morrison was our HOA board treasurer, and the kind of guy who treated his clipboard like a weapon of mass destruction. He'd been gunning for me ever since I questioned his emergency assessments at the monthly meeting. See, Derek had been pushing through $500 monthly fees for landscape improvements that looked suspiciously like his own backyard renovation. I'm a postal inspector for the federal government. 23 years of investigating mail theft, fraud, and postal crimes. If there's one thing you don't do to a postal inspector, it's mess with their mail. Derek had just declared war on someone who literally wrote the book on mail crime prosecution. It started with missing bills. My electric company sent a disconnection notice for non-payment, but I'd never received the original bill. My credit card company called about a missed payment, same story. Then my property tax notice disappeared. That's when I knew someone was intercepting my mail systematically. I set up a surveillance system, trail cameras hidden in my landscaping, motion sensors, and a GPS tracker inside a dummy package I mailed to myself. Modern mail theft is a federal crime with serious penalties, and I was going to document every single violation. The breakthrough came on a Thursday morning. Derek approached my mailbox at 5:47 a.m., opened it with what looked like a master key, and removed several pieces of mail. He sorted through them right there on the street, keeping some and dropping others. My cameras captured everything in high definition. But here's where it gets interesting. Derek wasn't just stealing random mail. He was targeting specific types of correspondence. Government notices, tax documents, legal mail, and anything from the city planning department. He was trying to keep me in the dark about official business that might affect the HOA. I followed Derek after he left my mailbox. He drove straight to the HOA office and went inside with my mail. Through the window, I watched him open envelopes, photograph documents, and file them in a cabinet marked Resident Communications. He was building a surveillance file on me using stolen federal mail. That's when I discovered the real scope of Derek's operation. He wasn't just targeting me, he was intercepting mail for 12 other residents who had questioned HOA decisions. Property assessments, legal notices, city correspondence, even personal mail from attorneys. Derek was running a full-scale intelligence operation. I called my supervisor at the Postal Service and requested permission to open an official investigation. Mail theft is a federal crime punishable by up to 5 years in prison, and Derek had just committed dozens of felonies. My supervisor assigned 2 additional investigators and authorized a full surveillance operation. We documented 3 weeks of Derek's mail theft routine. Every Tuesday and Thursday, he'd hit the same 12 mailboxes using duplicate keys. We tracked him to a local locksmith who admitted Derek had claimed to be a postal service contractor authorized to make emergency mailbox keys. The federal case was building beautifully, but I wanted to understand Derek's endgame. Why was he stealing specific types of mail? What was he doing with the information? I decided to set a trap using my expertise in postal crimes. I created a fake legal notice using official city letterhead. Completely legal for investigative purposes. The letter claimed I was filing a formal complaint against the HOA for financial mismanagement and demanding a forensic audit. I mailed it to myself and waited. Derek took the bait. He intercepted the fake legal notice and immediately called an emergency HOA board meeting. The agenda was addressing hostile resident actions and protecting community assets. He was going to use my stolen mail as evidence to rally the board against me. I attended the meeting with a recording device and a federal prosecutor on speed dial. Derek stood up and waved my fake legal notice in the air, claiming I was trying to destroy the community with frivolous lawsuits. He read portions of the letter aloud, proving he had illegally opened and read my mail. "Derek," I said calmly, "how did you get that document?" His face went white. It was in the community mailbox by mistake," he stammered. "Really? Because I have video evidence of you stealing it from my personal mailbox at 5:47 a.m. last Thursday. Would you like to see it?" The room went silent. Derek tried to backtrack, claiming he was protecting the community from dangerous residents, but 3 other homeowners stood up and said their mail had been going missing too. Mrs. Patterson said her social security checks kept disappearing. Mr. Kim said his business correspondence was being intercepted. I played the surveillance video on my phone. Crystal clear footage of Derek opening my mailbox, sorting through my mail, and walking away with federal documents. The other board members looked horrified. Derek tried to claim it was a misunderstanding, but federal mail theft doesn't have misunderstandings. The next morning, I filed formal charges: mail theft, identity theft, conspiracy to commit fraud, and violation of federal postal regulations. Derek was arrested at his office by federal agents while wearing his HOA polo shirt. The image of him being led away in handcuffs made the local news. But the investigation was just beginning. Derek's resident communications. Files contained stolen mail from dozens of homeowners spanning 3 years. Tax documents, legal notices, medical correspondence. Even love letters. He had been building dossiers on anyone who opposed HOA decisions. The federal prosecutor was thrilled. Derek's case became a textbook example of organized mail theft for personal gain. He was charged with 47 counts of mail theft, 12 counts of identity theft, and conspiracy to commit fraud. His lawyer immediately started plea negotiations. Derek's HOA career imploded overnight. The board voted to remove him immediately and launched an internal investigation into his financial management. They discovered he'd been using stolen tax documents to challenge residents' property assessments and keep HOA fees artificially low. The locksmith who made Derek's duplicate keys was also arrested. He'd been creating unauthorized mailbox keys for Derek for 2 years, thinking he was helping with community mail management. Federal agents found over 200 duplicate keys in Derek's possession. Derek's trial was a masterpiece of federal prosecution. The evidence was overwhelming. Video surveillance, stolen documents, witness testimony, and Derek's own recorded admissions. He pled guilty to all charges and received 18 months in federal prison, plus restitution to all victims. But the real punishment was the humiliation. Derek's mugshot appeared in the local paper with the headline, "HOA Treasurer Sentenced for Mail Theft Ring." His employer fired him. His wife filed for divorce. His neighbors avoided him like he was radioactive. The HOA was forced to hire a professional management company after Derek's conviction. They discovered years of financial irregularities, unauthorized spending, and mismanaged assessments. Derek's landscape improvements were actually personal home renovations billed to the community. I was elected to the new HOA board as treasurer, replacing Derek. My first action was implementing transparent financial reporting and eliminating all emergency assessments without homeowner votes. My second action was installing security cameras around the community mailboxes. The Postal Service used Derek's case as a training example for mail theft investigations. His systematic approach to intercepting specific types of mail became a case study in federal law enforcement academies. Derek's stupidity became educational material for future postal inspectors. Other HOA communities contacted me for advice after Derek's story went viral. Apparently, mail theft by HOA board members is more common than people realize. I started consulting with communities dealing with similar issues, always pro bono. Derek served 14 months in federal prison and was released on supervised probation. He's required to stay away from all HOA activities and can't hold any position involving financial responsibility. He works at a gas station now and drives a 15-year-old Honda. The best part, Derek's conviction created a legal precedent that's been used in dozens of other HOA corruption cases. His name is literally in federal court records as an example of how not to run a community organization. He became a cautionary tale. I still live in the same house, but now I actually enjoy checking my mail. Every piece of correspondence that arrives safely reminds me that Derek learned the hard way. You don't steal mail from a postal inspector. Some people collect stamps. I collect federal convictions. The community is thriving under professional management. No more mysterious assessments. No more missing mail. No more board members treating clipboards like crowns. Derek thought he could intimidate residents with stolen information, but he forgot that some residents have federal badges. Sometimes I drive past Derek at the gas station where he works. He won't make eye contact, but I can see the recognition in his face. He knows exactly who brought down his little mail theft empire, and every time I see him, I'm reminded that justice isn't just served, it's delivered. The moral of the story: HOA board members aren't above the law, especially federal law. Derek learned that stealing mail from a postal inspector is like bringing a clipboard to a federal investigation. You're going to lose, and you're going to lose spectacularly.
They say you never really own land. You just borrow it from the people who came before you. My grandmother believed that deeply. She planted every tree in our orchard by hand. A quiet woman who grew apples, pears, and peaches with more pride than most people take in their resumes. When she passed, I inherited the 10-acre patch just outside our suburban town. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. A canopy of blossoms in spring, a carpet of fruit in fall, and every tree with a story behind it. Then the letter started. I live just outside the Silver Pines residential community, an HOA-run neighborhood of 312 homes, complete with fountains, playgrounds, and precisely timed lawn watering. Karen Whitmore, the HOA president, had a vision: expand. Their new clubhouse needed a parking lot, and my orchard, the only underutilized green space within 2 miles. According to their newsletter, the HOA submitted a proposal to the city: rezone my orchard as multi-use municipal property under the claim it was abandoned land. Abandoned. They thought I wouldn't fight back. Karen showed up at my gate on a Tuesday in May. "We can offer you double market value," she said, in a tone that dripped with polite condescension. "We believe your land can serve the greater good." I looked past her to see HOA volunteers already measuring tree lines. I hadn't even agreed to a sale. "No thanks," I said, and closed the gate. That day, I installed cameras and began collecting every document I could find related to land ownership, zoning, and preservation law. 2 weeks later, I was served with a notice. The HOA had filed for eminent domain consideration with the city council, citing potential for increased community value. Karen used every tactic. She held meetings filled with emotional testimony about how parents had nowhere to park during sports events. HOA members signed petitions saying my land was unsightly. Some even claimed it was a fire hazard. They wanted to frame it as a public safety issue. What Karen didn't know is that my grandmother had been a land rights activist in the 1960s. I found letters, old permit filings, and a surprising document: a conservation grant issued in 1972 that made part of the orchard a recognized wildlife corridor. It had expired, but there was a clause: if the orchard ever hosted 3 or more endangered species at once, the land could be recertified as a permanent nature reserve. That would make it untouchable. I called a friend at the state ecology department. The race was on. I spent days in the orchard, documenting every bird call, setting up night vision cameras, and placing trail sensors. One week in, we got footage of a pair of endangered red-shouldered hawks nesting, then a rare species of frog, then the jackpot, a migrating pair of Indiana bats, roosting beneath a peach tree. I had what I needed. When word got out about the conservation application, Karen went ballistic. She accused me of falsifying wildlife reports, paid for an independent survey that conveniently found no rare species, and spread rumors about me hoarding land for tax fraud. I got anonymous letters threatening my fence. My mailbox was smashed. A drone hovered outside my window for 3 straight nights, but I kept going. The city scheduled a hearing. Both sides would present arguments. The room was packed. Karen gave a passionate speech about community needs, claiming I was denying children their future. I showed footage of nesting hawks, the bat recordings, and read excerpts from the 1972 grant. A wildlife biologist from the state confirmed our findings. The council went silent. Then came the twist. The city attorney revealed that if the conservation application was verified, not only would the land be protected, but the HOA could face fines for encroaching with their earlier survey equipment. 2 weeks later, the decision came. The orchard was designated a protected habitat under state conservation law, permanent, untouchable. Karen's plan collapsed overnight. The HOA had already spent $150,000 planning the lot, all of which was now a sunk cost. And because they'd used drones and unauthorized surveys, the city opened a formal investigation into privacy violations. I launched a nonprofit, the Blossom Haven Reserve. Grants came quickly. We built walking paths, educational plaques, even a small wildlife observatory. Kids from local schools came for field trips. Bird watchers visited. The orchard became a hub for quiet joy. Karen? She resigned 6 months later. Her final newsletter entry warned about the dangers of private citizens weaponizing bureaucracy. I planted 3 new trees that spring. Each had a nameplate, one for my grandmother, one for the hawks, and one for every neighbor who stood with me. The orchard wasn't just saved, it was reborn. I still remember what my grandmother used to say: nature always remembers who takes care of it. Turns out, the law does too. Subscribe to DD Stories for more satisfying HOA takedowns.